Going to continue history of the churches. We started last week with the Catholic Inquisition, and I'm just going to move. There were just a couple of slides here. I'm just going to move right through that we covered last week. We saw the gradual development of the apostasy. The gradual development of the Inquisition, which included apostasy, merger of church and state, Augustine and his teachings, and then also the conditions were ripe around the time of AD 1000. We see, and then we looked at the expansion by Pope Innocent III, and how he was, with conditions ripe, all it takes is just the right person, the right leader to push things to the next level, and that's what Pope Innocent did. And so he was. All you need to do is stamp out the Bible reading, have a leader who wants to force his will on everyone, and I mean on pain of death, not just forcing will on everyone, but if you don't listen, I have the power to have you put to death. And so then there's the persecution of the Waldenses, and then there was the crusades against the quote heretics. And so we pick up here with more expansion by Pope Gregory Ix. He was the nephew of Pope Innocent III. Now, Innocent is the one who turned the persecution. There was already persecution in the hundreds of years before what we call the Inquisition, but the Inquisition was turning the persecution into a machine, just a well-oiled machine. And Innocent did that. And so what Gregory only needed to do was expand its reach and just fine-tune its barbarities. He didn't really have to do a whole lot more, but he did but he just made it worse. He issued 2 bulls appointing the Dominicans and Franciscans as inquisitors and sending them forth with authority to destroy Bible-believing Christians. He issued a bull in 1238 promising if anyone died while attempting to capture the Pope's enemies, they would receive a full pardon of their sins. And so notice how they love to use that as a way to keep people in line to do what they want them to do, is either, well, if you don't listen, if you don't do what's right, you're going to be damned, or if you do what we say, you can get a full pardon of your sins. And that's a powerful force, especially with the people that are very ignorant of the Bible. And so they're being dominated by this leadership. And what a promise, full pardon. Oh, wow, that's what a wonderful thing that people would think about. Or maybe they just keep them in fear. And not just people thinking, oh, that's great, but being afraid that if they don't do what is said, then the bad would happen to them. The opposite would happen. The inquisitors had authority to capture, try, and deliver up to death all that disagreed with Rome's dogmas. And there's the worldwide expansion of this. Actually, let me go back and make sure I didn't miss something here. Oh, yes. So there was a bit of the authority that was issued for to those as the inquisitors. They had authority to make sure that all public officials were obligated to assist when needed. Any laws that hindered the Inquisition could be annulled. No one can interfere with the work of the inquisitors. All citizens from ages 12 to 14 and older were sworn as spies of the Inquisition and were required to reveal all offenders. The inquisitors could gather all the citizens together at the sound of a bell at any time they pleased. The inquisitors set up their own terrible prisons and could torture and punish the heretics. Those who were caught had no legal recourse. Those who were caught didn't have the right to confront their accuser or know who they were. Anyone could bring an accusation, no matter how infamous or dishonest the person was. Even if they had a bad reputation, I mean, we still got to listen to them because there could be some truth to that. There could be some heretic here. Anyone assisting those in the hands of the inquisitors became the object of persecution. Anyone, no matter how powerful, could be charged with heresy. The inquisitors could confiscate almost at will which led to great corruption. So they would confiscate property and goods and those types of things. Even after they were dead, the heretics were condemned by the Inquisition so they could rob their children or grandchildren of any inheritance. Even Roman Catholics were arrested because they were, if they were suspected of thinking for themselves. Can't have that. We can't have people thinking for themselves. And so anytime there's that hint that someone's breaking out of that mold, that bondage that they have these people in, that was a red flag. And think about how that can still work today. How it can still work today. I picture, and I realize this is a far cry as far as a comparison, as far as the end result, as people being put to death is a whole lot worse than the comparison I'm going to make. But I was thinking when it said that any laws that hindered the Inquisition could be annulled. All public officials were obligated to assist when needed. No one could interfere with the work of the inquisitors. I think about whenever there's when there's an emergency declaration that's issued today. Pretty much that overrides almost anything. That's on the books. Those laws are on the books. That if a governor or a president, in this case, Department of Health and Human Services in the U.S., if they declare an emergency, what the focus is. All right, and notice the last 9 months. What does everybody hear about, and what dominates everybody's attention and way of life and how they have to go about their business? It's coronavirus. And so I realize there's a far cry as far as people aren't being put to death necessarily here in America for not following the guidelines that are set forth. But it's an example, though, of when a government or when the leadership decides to focus on a certain issue, how much it can dominate and override a lot of other aspects of life. Well, that was the way it was for the Inquisition, except the stakes were a whole lot higher because these are people by the thousands and probably millions being killed and tortured and thrown into prison. But it was when the Pope said it was time for the Inquisition, and when there was business to be done, everything else took a back seat to that. And so it's a cautionary tale, not a tale, but I mean it's a cautionary example of when there's so much power amassed, what the capabilities are by leadership when they get into authority. Yes?
I have a question about the bulls in general.
Yes.
Were they in force until they were taken away or done with officially by the Catholic Church? Or
That's a good question. I really don't.
There's 2 bulls here.
Yeah.
We don't see this happening.
Right.
So
I don't know. I do know that, I think later on we'll probably get into this regarding the Second Vatican Council. But the Second Vatican Council is when they decided to change their approach to how they handled, basically how they handled it. I would guess that probably that if there was one pope that issued a bull, that as long as he kept that in force, it was in force. But then maybe when the next pope came, he would choose how to approach it himself. That would be my guess, but I didn't look into that specifically. But I do know with the Second Vatican Council, that's when they shifted, not to change their doctrine or they just changed their tactics on how they were going to go about trying to convert and have power. So.
do you know when the Second Vatican Council?
I don't know. I think we'll get to that probably here. I think so. That'll probably be in our book or in there. I'm sure I'll look it up regardless whether it's going to be in one of the lessons or not. I don't remember when that was.
I know by the 1500s and the 1600s, the same groups, the Dominicans and Franciscans, were still the Inquisition. It was still going on. And then 30-year war took place between 1618 and 1648. That was the Protestants versus Catholics. Most of the countries in Europe were involved, and by that, in the end, it was a Protestant victory in 1648 that broke the Catholic domination.
Yeah, and I think that was probably what prompted maybe a Second Vatican Council is that they did see that their power was weakening anyway, because they would have had no incentive to, I'm just going to look it up real quick, since you asked. Second Vatican Council, that was, well, that's actually fairly recent. That was in 1962 is when it started. That, and so they're, we'll try to get into that at some other time, but the power was decreasing anyway, and so that's why, and that's how the Lord used the Protestants. I certainly don't agree with all the Protestant doctrine and various things, but at the same time, God used the Protestants both to bring forth more of the Scriptures, the distribution of the Scriptures, as well as, although what we saw with the Waldenses, they were also very active in the distribution of the Scriptures, but in a broader way, the Lord used the Protestants to at least break the domination of the Catholic Church. There were many Protestants, reformers, who persecuted Baptists as well, but as far as God still used the reformers, Protestants, to break the Catholic Church. So I have not looked. I'm not as familiar. I have not read much about the Second Vatican Council, but I mean, even as recent as a couple hundred years ago, the Catholic Church still had a lot of authority in certain countries in Europe. So even though now there are secular governments, but they still retain that heritage, and there's still that influence there, I'm sure. But to whatever degree, it's just especially the Second Vatican Council was kind of a formal changing of the approach, becoming more ecumenical and a kinder, gentler Catholic Church. But they're very evangelistic. They're very evangelistic. I've been seeing many Facebook advertisements from Catholic organizations or like a bishop. There's a certain bishop who apparently has a strong online presence, and there's just various things that, for some reason, in the last few months, I've just seen a whole bunch of Catholic. Now, I thought it was because I was looking up stuff about the Catholic Church on the website or online. And then Facebook knows, if I'm maybe searching for something, and but at the same time, I'm still seeing them. I haven't been really searching for that much. So unless they've just continued to show me them until I tell them I don't want to see them anymore, I don't know. But they're very evangelistic, because they have the new Word on Fire Bible, which is looking at God's Word through the Catholic perspective, and anyway, so there's all kinds of things that they're doing. But so that's a good question about the bulls, and I will try to look into to more of that as far as how long did they last. But once again, it's also unless a later pope purposely told them not to. When you had these different groups, whether the Dominicans, Franciscans, and then it was, I believe, the Jesuits were responsible for the Counter-Reformation, and so when you had these groups doing it, in some ways it didn't really matter as much who the Pope was, unless the Pope came right out and said he didn't want them doing it anymore, so it set all those things in motion. But we'll try to get into that at some point later. I have to look in our book, or the book I'm following, to see how much of that it goes into, but at the very least I will still address that since we came up today. Eliana? They are. They are. Bulls are proclamations, edicts, basically saying, as the Pope, here is my declaration. Here's what needs to be done. Here's what I want done. It's like a king giving a decree. There went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. But when a pope issued a bull, this was basically like a law. He was just saying, this is what I want done, or I'm declaring that these people are cursed, they're heretics, or whatever it was they decided to do. All right, so then we see also the worldwide expansion. It was in the Italian states, France, Spain, Belgium, Netherlands, Moravia, Bohemia, Portugal, Ireland, South America, Central America, Grenada, Cuba, Philippines, and even parts of India. Just so many, just a worldwide reach of this Inquisition. And wherever the church had power, the Catholic Church had power, the Inquisition was set up. And it was very difficult to escape because all secular authorities and common citizens were required to be on alert for the heretics. So think about that. Think about being on alert. Just the saying, you need to, and I think about what the now our governor hasn't really come right out and said this, but a few months ago, the governor of Pennsylvania, when he issued a mask mandate, and once again, these are two different things as far as not life and death, as far as being put to death, but in today's example. But it's still some of the same tactics or approaches. And the governor of Pennsylvania, he issued a mask mandate, but he came right out and said, well, I'm not going to have the police or other authorities enforce it. He said it's going to be up to the people. The people have to, basically, he's basically giving people a green light to just put pressure on those not wearing masks and really get after them. And from what I've heard around where my family is, even though it's a more conservative area, there are still a number of people around there that are more than happy to put up a fuss about things and give people a hard time. And so that's literally pitting citizens against each other. And I mean, right from the words of the governor a few months ago. And now our governor hasn't said that in so many words, but you try going out around and go into a place where they're, without a mask on, I mean, you're going to get the third degree from people. So,
It's racist.
You think so?
Yeah, not in the sense of exactly being a particular race, but certainly, because you're being different, you're being harassed.
Yeah.
To be like somebody being harassed for wearing a
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It has turned into a lot of that it's a part of you now. It's supposed to be a part of you, and yeah. So, yeah.
Forgetting the whole context of some people can't wear one medically.
Yeah. Yeah. That has been forgotten.
Or psychologically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Psychological is medical.
Yeah. There was a 2-year. Now this kind of shows where we are. There was a 2-year-old child or a family that was thrown off of a United Airlines flight because their 2-year-old child did not want to wear a mask, was getting upset. And anybody 2 years and older is supposed to wear a mask, no exceptions on a plane.
It happens more than once.
Yeah, it has. So anyway, and I realize it's a different, it is apples and oranges to a certain degree, but you look at the same type of mentality and the same type of tactics, and how someday in the future it would not be difficult to imagine if enough of a society is convinced of something or is being led on by, whether it's the media or elected officials or bureaucrats for that matter, how much they can use that in any context, really, in the future as things go on. So, and that's
This all takes the pressure off of smokers.
Yeah, takes the pressure. Yeah, yeah. It's so you can have your smoking, you can have your alcohol, you can have your marijuana, but you can't. But if you don't wear a mask.
Yeah.
Boy, you are just on par with a murderer. I mean, you just hate people, and so I personally don't like wearing a mask and then walking by someone who is smoking, and then you get all that scent. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible. I was in the store and I walked by a smoker. I could tell someone who was a smoker, and just that scent just lingers right in there. It's so powerful. Whereas if you're not wearing a mask, you walk by, you smell it a bit, and then it's gone. But anyway, that's not about the. There is at this point, no mask inquisition, thankfully. We haven't had hopefully none of us have had midnight knocks, haven't had midnight knocks on the door. Are you wearing your, how many people did you have for Christmas? How many people did you have over for Christmas? Anyway, but it's the same mentality. That's the whole point. It's the same mentality of when people get something in their minds and how the public goes right along with it. Depending on, interestingly enough, the states where there is the greatest ignorance and opposition to God's word are the states where that is the worst. It is. The states where there's more Christian people, more Bible-believing people, and generally more conservative, it's not the same mentality as much. You're still going to have people like that. So anyway, all secular authorities and common citizens are required to be on alert for the heretics. So think about secular authorities, common citizens, even the innkeepers. So think about that person at the door, at the store. If you're not wearing a mask, they're supposed to be on alert if someone's not wearing a mask, or they got to count the number of people coming into the store. Once again, they're not going to put you to death, but we're seeing, at least we get to see a little taste of those types of examples. The inquisitors kept detailed records and shared information with each other. Travelers and foreigners were especially viewed with suspicion. The priests constantly warned the people to be on the lookout for heretics. And so it was very difficult to escape. Spies were hired and given special rewards for success. By the way, there was a church in California where they literally had public health officials spying. They went in undercover into a church, spying on the church to see if they were singing and seeing how many people they had. That was a few months ago. And the church got fined, and so that happened. So they made it was difficult to escape. And then every effort was made to find out more from the captives. And so if they caught one suspected Bible believer, they would then torture them or really pressure them to give up names of other people. And then the prison cells. Prison cells were small, dark, and gloomy cells. There was no heat in winter. Very little, if any, clothing and blankets. Many of them did not have clothing at all. Prisoners chained close to the floor, exposed to where the rats and the vermin were. Meager food of poor quality, and usually no medical treatment. No books or writing utensils, and no visits by relatives or loved ones, which, if you had a visit from a relative or loved one, they'd probably be thrown into prison too, because they would be suspected of that. Requirement of silence in most prisons. And so, just think about just the horrendous thing, what's going on, or what went on during the Inquisition. It's hard to even imagine. And by the way, I'm not even getting into their methods of torture. There's some specific examples of the methods of torture, and I'm not even getting into it. But let's just say it's unspeakably horrible what they did to people. But in closing, one of the examples I'm going to read is of this lady, a godly lady who did go through some torture. And go back to this example here. And I didn't even also get into what they did as far as the burning of the heretics and all of that. Just the most horrendous things that they did. Let me go back here. All right, there was a method of torture called the rack, which is what they used to stretch people out and put them into all kinds of contortions. And there was a woman named Anne Askew, the first woman to be martyred in 16th century England. After the 24-year-old woman was condemned to die and was imprisoned in the London Tower to await execution, her persecutors attempted to get her to inform on other believers. They also hoped to gain information against Queen Catherine herself, the Protestant wife of wicked King Henry VIII. When Anne refused to give them any information, they put the frail woman upon the rack and commanded Sir Anthony Knyvet, K-N-Y-V-E-T, lieutenant of the Tower, to instruct his jailer to torture her. He did so, but not very strenuously, being mindful of her feminine weakness. Not being satisfied with the racking given to her by the lieutenant, Thomas Wriothesley, Chancellor of England, and Master Rich, the Solicitor General, angrily took control of the rack with their own hands and treated the godly woman with an inhuman viciousness. So intent were they on gaining the names of any high-placed ladies who believed in the grace of Jesus Christ that they cruelly tortured her, so much so that she was unable to walk after that and had to be carried to her execution in a chair. All the while she did not cry out and bore their wicked torments with the patient grace given to her of the Lord, refusing to turn any of her friends over to the tormentors. She finally swooned from the pain, and Sir Knivet took her up in his arms and laid her on the floor. When she woke, and while she was still lying on the hard stone floor, Wriothesley remained by her for 2 hours longer, attempting to talk her into recanting her religious views. In her written testimony, the brave Christian woman gave a glorious witness to her faith in Jesus Christ and in His blood and grace alone for salvation, and she stated that her sole authority was the Bible. Though her father, husband, and son had abandoned her because of her faith, and though she was hated by the rulers of her own country, we can be sure that this humble Christian lady was not abandoned by her heavenly Father. And Psalm 27:10 says, "When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up." Anne and 3 other believing dissenters were brought to the place of execution on July 16, 1546. When they were chained to a stake, they were offered a pardon if they would sign a recantation. They refused even to look at the paper containing the pardon and stated they had not come to that place to deny their Lord. At that, the fire was lit, and Anne and her friends in Christ were burned to death by the Catholic authorities. And so there's an example of a woman who paid that price but stayed faithful to the Lord. And may we be people who stay faithful to the Lord in the face of things that greatly pale in comparison to what they faced back then. And it shows also the importance of God has left His people on this earth for this time, that we need to be the salt and light and the witnesses that He wants us to be. Because think about when there's just darkness, when there's just blindness. Think about when a whole society, when a whole country, a whole region lives in darkness, and just how much wickedness and horrible things, how many horrible things are possible. The only thing that holds that back is the salt and the light. That's the only thing that holds that back. It's the Holy Spirit indwelling His people and the Holy Spirit working. And so God still has us here for a reason. And even when it seems like the night gets darker, the days grow dim, and the night gets darker, there's still a light. There's still light here on the earth. There's still light here in America, and we need to make sure that we keep that focus and keep that priority on walking with the Lord and staying faithful to Him, being the witnesses that He wants us to be, because it does make a difference. There's a far cry when you visit different places. Now, I've not traveled internationally. I've only ever been to Canada a couple times. That's the extent of my international travel. But some that have maybe done more international travel. I can't speak to other places. I can imagine it, but I can't say I've experienced it. The spiritual darkness in other places that have less of a Christian witness. But you go even to different portions of our country, and you can tell the difference of what influence there is, if there's a greater Christian witness or not among the people. And that's why it's very concerning to me when you go to a place there is a greater Christian witness, but there's a lot of compromise and a lot of worldliness among God's people, because they are dampening that light. The salt is losing its savor. But there's still a difference when the gospel is preached and there are people who actually believe the Bible. There are differences even in parts of this country based on that.